It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. The kind of day when people casually strolled into the store, browsed the aisles, picked up what they needed, and went on with their lives. But no one inside that upscale department store in downtown Atlanta had any idea they were about to witness something that would shake the entire internet. Security cameras blinked quietly in the corners. Shiny counters gleamed. And a crowd of shoppers, mostly unaware, were about to find themselves in the middle of a moment that would expose deep-rooted prejudice and power all in the same breath. She walked in wearing simple jeans, a plain cream top, and sneakers so quiet you could barely hear her footsteps. No security, no entourage, no flashy designer labels. Her hair was tied back, her eyes calm, focused. Most people passed her without a second glance. She looked like any ordinary black woman doing a bit of shopping after a long day. What they didn't know was that she wasn't ordinary. Not even. Close. Her name was Simone Carter. And she wasn't just shopping, she was observing. This store, that exact store, was one of nearly 200 she owned across the country. Her name wasn't on the storefront, and she preferred it that way. She built her empire quietly, brick by brick, after starting from nothing but grit, grace, and a dream. But today she was checking in on one of her locations in person, undercover. After receiving several complaints from staff and customers alike, what happened next? No one saw coming. A young sales associate, nervous, new, and unsure, approached Simone to ask if she needed help. Simone smiled warmly, asked about a display near the back, and thanked the girl for being helpful. It was a simple moment, but it was interrupted. From across the room, the store manager stormed over. A tall man in an expensive suit and polished shoes, with a voice that had clearly spent years giving orders but never learning when to listen. He didn't like what he saw. A black woman being helped by one of his staff? And the woman wasn't dressed appropriately for the store's standards? He didn't recognize her. Didn't see the quiet power in her posture. Didn't pause to ask questions. He just assumed, and that was his mistake. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, stepping between Simone and the young associate. "This section is not for browsing, it's for paying customers. You need to leave." The tone in his voice turned heads. The energy in the room shifted. A few customers looked up, startled. Some reached for their phones. Someone's eyebrows lifted, but she remained calm. She asked politely what he meant. "I said get out," the manager repeated, louder this time. "We don't need troublemakers in here pretending they belong." "Don't make me call security?" There was a beat of silence, a second of stunned disbelief. The young associate looked horrified but frozen in place. Simone didn't move. Then, in front of everyone, without warning, the manager raised his hand and slapped her. Gasps echoed. A woman near the makeup counter dropped her shopping bag. A father nearby instinctively pulled his daughter behind him. Someone shouted, "What are you doing?" But it was too late. The damage had been done. Simone stood still, her face turned. From the force, the sting of it still fresh on her skin. But her expression remained calm, controlled, powerful. She slowly turned to face him. "You really shouldn't have done that," she said quietly. The manager scoffed, thinking he had made his point. "Or what, you gonna report me?" Someone from the back whispered, "Is she okay?" Another person muttered, "This is not gonna end well for him." And it wasn't, because at that very moment, a tall man in a dark suit pushed through the crowd. His voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "we have your car ready. Do you want the store closed now or after the police report?" The manager's face went pale. The man turned to him. "You just laid hands on Simone Carter, the CEO, the owner of this entire brand." The crowd exploded in stunned murmurs. The manager blinked. "What? No, that's not. She's—" He stammered, shook his head. Looked like he had seen a ghost, but Simone didn't look at him again. She turned to the young associate and smiled gently. "You handled that with dignity," she said. "Come see me tomorrow morning at headquarters. I think we'll find you a better role." Then, as calmly as she had entered, she began to walk out of the store, but just as she stepped toward the door, A voice from behind caught her attention. Wait. Wait. Please don't leave yet. I didn't know. I made a mistake. The manager was panicking now. Sweat on his brow, voice trembling, eyes darting to the customers still filming, but Simone kept walking as the sliding glass. Doors opened, another scene began to unfold outside the store. Just a few feet away, a pregnant white woman, tired and teary-eyed, was struggling to stand in a crowded bus shelter. Everyone nearby seemed too distracted or unwilling to help until a young black teenager stood up from his seat and gently offered it to her. She hesitated, surprised, then took the seat with a soft, "Thank you." A few moments later, as the bus arrived, she stood, reached into her bag, and pressed a folded piece of paper into the boy's hand before walking away. He unfolded it slowly, confused, and what he saw written on that note would soon flip his world upside down. But that's a story for another moment. Back inside the store, the manager was now surrounded by corporate security. The man who had once shouted orders was now begging for forgiveness. But forgiveness? That wasn't part of the policy Simone Carter had written for situations like this, and what happened next would not only make headlines, it would shake the entire retail industry to its core. Simone's heels clicked on the polished floor as she exited the store, but her mind was already racing back to the day she first walked through those automatic doors as an unknown shopper. Years ago, she'd stood in that same entrance, clutching a single grocery bag, wondering how she could ever turn her small corner market into anything more. She remembered the whispered doubts of friends, the long nights poring over spreadsheets by lamplight, and the first time she signed a lease for what would become her first official boutique. She'd learned early that success demanded more than vision. It demanded resilience when everyone else refused to see your worth. Behind her, the store manager sank into a chair in the security office, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a prison uniform. He replayed the moment of contact over and over, the unexpected stillness in her eyes, the authority in her voice after the slap, the immediate shift in the crowd's energy. He had thought he was enforcing policy. Instead, he had humiliated himself. He knew corporate would want an explanation. He knew the board watched every incident. And he knew he had no idea what was coming next. Outside, the teenage boy Tariq sat on a low concrete ledge beside the bus shelter. The folded note trembled in his hand. Earlier that morning, he had left his shift at the local grocery store, feeling invisible, like a ghost among aisles of customers. He wasn't used to people stopping for him, least of all pregnant strangers. Yet something about the way the woman's eyes had met his compelled him to stand and offer her the seat. Now, as he read the note in the fading afternoon light, he felt a knot tighten in his chest. The words scrawled there hinted at an opportunity that could change the course of his life if he dared to believe them. Inside the store, security guards reviewed surveillance footage on multiple screens. One guard paused the tape just as the manager's hand made contact with Simone's cheek. Another rewound to catch the flash of her expression, pain, yes, but also an unspoken challenge. There were dozens of onlookers captured in those frames, cell phones raised, faces a mix of shock and anger. The audio feed picked up a single girl's cry. He can't just do that. That girl, they noted, was the same associate Simone had defended. Security logged that detail alongside timestamps, hours, names, and locations. Corporate would have a full incident report by morning. Simone walked briskly down the street toward the parking garage. Her mind flicked to the email she had drafted at dawn, a resignation letter from her own management team. Too often, she'd heard that managers like him treated staff and customers like obstacles, but she hadn't expected to be on the receiving end of such blatant disrespect, and she certainly hadn't expected her own brand to betray its principles in public. She had built her business on courtesy, inclusion, and empowerment. Tonight, she would decide how to ensure those values stayed. Non-negotiable. 2 blocks away, Marcus Reyes, Simone's chief operations officer, waited in a rented sedan. His phone chimed with alerts from corporate HR, calls from legal, calls from PR, even a snippet of the live stream already circulating online. He tapped his screen to read the Twitter thread, thousands of retweets, hashtags demanding accountability, a flood of comments about racism and corporate culture. He glanced at an incoming text from Simone. "Take me to HQ. We'll talk strategy." He slipped the phone into his pocket. He'd learned over the years that when Simone said, "We'll talk," she meant action. And he was ready. Meanwhile, in the hospital's maternity ward, the pregnant woman Lydia wrapped her fingers around the edge of her own torn sleeve, remembering the weight of the teenager's generosity. She had fled her hometown after a scandal that left her reputation in ruins and her career in tatters. No one had offered real compassion during her darkest hour. Until this kind stranger gave her a moment of relief and a sense of dignity, she folded the note in her palm and promised herself she would repay that kindness, but she didn't know how. All she could do was hope the words she wrote would guide him to the truth. Back at the store, the manager sat before a blank computer screen, cursor blinking in the middle of a draft apology email that felt too hollow to send. He drafted and deleted lines. "I am sorry for my actions. I deeply regret. I will attend sensitivity training." None of it sounded genuine. He thought of calling his mentor, but feared judgment. He thought of calling his wife, but feared confession. In the silence of that sterile office, he felt smaller than ever, like the walls were closing in, demanding he answer for his ignorance. Outside, Tariq refolded the note and slipped it into his pocket. He felt the weight of its promise, a chance. To leave his crowded apartment, to finish college, to make his mother proud. The city bus hissed to a stop, doors opening like a stage inviting him forward. He hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. Would this be another cruel prank, like the dozens he had endured at school and online? Or could it really be the lifeline it seemed? He stepped onto the bus, heart pounding, ready to chase the possibility written for him as day turned into dusk. The pieces of these lives began to move toward each other in scene gears, and a clock ticking toward a moment none of them could predict. Simone in her tailored coat, resolute and poised. The manager in his empty office, shaken and contrite. Marcus at the wheel, calculating risk and reward. Lydia cradling hope in her hospital room, remembering that boy's kindness. And Tariq, seated by the window, eyes fixed on the city lights, clutching a note that might unlock his future. None of them knew how their stories would intertwine. None knew if the fallout from today's events would destroy the reputations they had built, or forge alliances they never imagined. But each of them felt, in their bones, that change was coming. And as the city lights flickered on, the silent currents of fate swirled around them, carrying with them the power to reshape lives, reveal truths, and challenge every assumption they had ever held. And that power, as quiet and persistent as breath itself, was only just beginning to stir. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the city skyline, casting long shadows across the glass towers downtown. Inside a sleek boardroom on the top floor of Carter Enterprises headquarters, tension filled the air like static before a storm. Simone sat at the head of the table, hands folded, her expression unreadable. To her left, Marcus scrolled through a growing list of news headlines on his tablet, everyone echoing the same story. Store manager, slaps black woman turns out. She owns the chain. The internet was on fire. Celebrities had weighed in. Customers were threatening boycotts. And Simone hadn't said a single word to the press. Across from her sat Danielle, the head of corporate communications, nervously reviewing drafts of the press statement. We could issue something soft, focusing on company values and pledging an investigation. Or we go bold public apology, fire the manager on camera, and announce a new equity policy initiative. Simone looked up slowly. Why do we need to announce values we should have already been living by? Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it landed hard. This isn't a PR issue. It's a leadership one. I trusted people to run my stores with integrity. What happened yesterday isn't just about one man. It's about every time someone walked into my store and was made to feel like they didn't belong. Marcus leaned forward. We've pulled footage from other locations. There are similar complaints, subtle discrimination, biased hiring. A lot of it never reached you. Simone's jaw tightened. Then I've been blind. That ends today. But outside that boardroom, not everyone agreed with the way things were being handled. Inside the regional manager's office, just 4 floors below, tension was rising for a different reason. Derek Walton, who oversaw 12 stores in the southeast, was pacing. He had hired the store manager now at the center of the controversy, Tom Granger, man he personally recommended during a corporate expansion project just last year. Derek wasn't just worried about fallout. He was worried about losing control. He picked up his phone and called Tom, who had been placed on temporary leave. "Don't say anything to the press," Derek warned. "Let this blow over. The company needs a scapegoat right now, but if you go down quietly, I'll see to it you land on your feet elsewhere." "You've been loyal. I won't forget that." Tom, sitting in his apartment surrounded by unopened mail and silence, held the phone tightly. His voice was hoarse. "She didn't even flinch, Derek. She just looked at me like she already knew how this would end." "You made a mistake," Derek said quickly. "But you're not a bad guy. You acted on impulse." These days, they twist everything into a race issue. Tom didn't respond. Deep down, he wasn't sure if it hadn't been about race. He had assumed she didn't belong, hadn't even listened, hadn't even thought. And now his entire career was unraveling. Elsewhere across the city, the teenage boy, Tariq, was walking slowly down a hallway that looked too clean, too quiet, and far too unfamiliar. He was inside the Carter Foundation building, holding the note the pregnant woman had given him and replaying her words over and over. "Give this to the front desk. You'll know what to do next." He hadn't believed it at first. Thought it was some strange joke. But curiosity had led him here, and now he stood at the reception desk while a woman handed him a visitor badge and said, "Simone Carter's assistant will see you now." He froze. "Wait, what? Simone Carter?" The woman nodded. "She's expecting you." In a modest conference room upstairs, Tariq sat stiffly in a chair, heart racing, knees bouncing. He kept glancing at the framed photos on the wall. Simone speaking at youth centers, cutting ribbons at schools, giving scholarships to students who looked just like him. When the door opened and Simone stepped inside, he stood up so quickly. He nearly knocked over the chair. She smiled gently. "You must be Tariq," he stammered. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't know this note was connected to you. I just gave up my seat, that's all." She nodded. "And that one small act told me more about your character than any resume ever could." Tariq blinked, unsure what was happening. "I didn't do it for anything in return?" "I know," she said. "And that's why I want to offer you something." He leaned forward, stunned. But before she could finish, her assistant stepped in and whispered something into her ear. Simone's expression shifted. "Excuse me," she said to Tariq. "I'll be right back." She stepped into the hallway where Marcus was waiting with a folder in his hand. He handed it to her without a word. Inside were documents from an anonymous. Tip emails, internal memos, and complaint reports that had been buried or redirected by regional management. All of them pointed to a disturbing pattern of behavior: selective mistreatment of Black and Latino customers, biased hiring practices, and a culture of silence among leadership. Simone scanned the pages, her stomach twisting. This wasn't just one bad store, she murmured. This was allowed to spread. Marcus nodded. "And guess who signed off on most of the hiring recommendations?" He paused. "Derek Walton." Simone clenched her jaw. "We need to meet with him, today." Meanwhile, Lydia, still resting in her hospital room, watched the news on a small screen mounted to the wall. When she saw the headline about Simone Carter, her hand went to her mouth. She hadn't known. She had just wanted to thank the boy who had shown her unexpected kindness. Now, the ripples of that small moment had reached places she never imagined. She reached for her phone and began typing a message, her fingers shaking slightly. She didn't know if Tariq would ever see her again, but she had to try. Back in the boardroom, Simone re-entered, now holding the folder. "Change of plans," she said. "We're launching an internal audit on every store. I want interviews with staff, community partners, even customers. No more silence, no more sweeping things under the rug." Marcus added, "And if we find proof of regional cover-ups, we cut them out." Danielle looked nervous. Won't this spark more headlines? More bad press? Simone's voice was low but firm. Maybe, but hiding the truth is worse. As the team dispersed to carry out her orders, Simone returned to her office and stared. Out the window, watching the city buzz below. Her reflection looked back at her through the glass, strong but tired. There was still so much she didn't know. So many people she had entrusted with her vision who had twisted it into something ugly. But now, she was wide awake, and she was ready to uncover every layer of the truth. Far away in a dimly lit apartment, Derek got an anonymous call. The voice on the other end simply said, "She knows, she's coming." And in that moment, for the first time in his career, Derek Walton felt fear, the kind of fear that only comes when the person you underestimated turns out to be the one with all the power, and the reckoning, it was just beginning. The evening sky darkened as a storm began to gather over the city. The wind picked up, clouds heavy with rain, matching the weight settling in the air inside Carter Enterprises. Simone stood at the edge of her office window, her fingers tracing the edge of her blazer. She had reviewed every document, every message, every buried complaint that had been handed to her. The scale of the cover-up was worse than she imagined. Names she trusted were tied to decisions that hurt the very people she built her company to serve. And at the center of it all, Derek Walton. She turned to Marcus, who had just entered the room, silent and tense. "Did he respond to the meeting request?" Marcus nodded. "He said he'll come. He doesn't know we've seen the reports. Yet he still thinks this is just about damage control." Simone's eyes narrowed. "Good, let him walk into the truth." As they headed down to the executive conference room, word had already begun to spread through the building. Employees whispered in the hallways. Some were scared, others quietly hopeful. For years, complaints had been ignored or redirected. People of color passed over for promotions, accused of shoplifting without cause, or treated like they didn't belong in stores they spent their hard-earned money in. Simone had always promised a different kind of company, one built on dignity. And now the cracks were exposed. In another part of the city, Derek Walton pulled into the Carter parking garage. His usual confidence was cracked, but he wore the same clean-cut look he always had, tie straight, jacket crisp, watch polished. He believed in image. He believed he could talk his way through anything. And even now, even with the headlines screaming across every platform, he believed he could spin it. He had done it before. Just a matter of saying the right things to the right people. As he walked into the building, passing faces that didn't greet him the same way anymore, a sharp unease settled in his chest. The receptionist barely looked up. The security guard didn't offer a smile. It wasn't spoken, but it was felt. The air had shifted. Meanwhile, Tariq stood in his bedroom staring at a official Carter Enterprises letterhead. An offer. Internship? Full scholarship? Mentorship under Simone Carter herself. His mother, sitting on the edge of the bed with tears in her eyes, couldn't stop repeating, "You deserve this." But inside, Tariq still felt torn. Why him? He had only done what felt right. He hadn't expected anything in return. But now, his future was being rewritten, and a quiet fear crept in. What if he couldn't live up to it? His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "They're trying to clean this up behind closed doors. The people deserve to know everything. Don't let them bury it again." Tariq stared at the message. No name, no follow-up, just those words. His fingers hovered over the screen, uncertain. Then he looked at the Carter Foundation folder on his desk, filled with outlines of upcoming community projects, youth programs, housing initiatives. He thought about every person who never got the same chance. Maybe this wasn't just about him anymore. Back at headquarters, Derek stepped into the conference room. It was quiet. Marcus stood near the door, arms folded. Danielle sat off to the side, notes in hand. And at the head of the table was Simone, calm, composed, and absolutely still. He smiled nervously. "Simone, thank you for agreeing to meet. I know tensions are high, but I think we can." She raised one hand. He stopped mid-sentence. "I know what you've done," she said simply. He blinked. "I'm not sure what you mean." Simone reached into a folder and slid a thick file across the table toward him. Customer complaints, staff terminations, internal memos redirected, hiring practices based on appearance, not qualifications, and dozens of decisions you signed off on under the guise of company policy. Tell me again, you're not sure. Derek stared down at the folder, jaw tight. Those were business decisions? The market. No, she interrupted. They were your decisions. You created a system that targeted people who look like me. You weaponized your position. You protected people like Tom because he looked like you. And now the very brand I built from scratch is stained by the choices you made in my name. He stood up. Simone, please. If you let us go public, we could lose shareholders. The company could take a huge hit. We can make internal changes, quietly. Simone's expression didn't move. You still think this is about protecting the company? I'm trying to protect the people it is built to serve. A long silence filled the room. Then the door opened again. In walked the young associate from the store, the one who tried to help Simone before the incident. She looked nervous but determined. You asked me to come, she said softly. Simone smiled. Yes, have a seat. Derek looked confused. What is this? Simone leaned forward. Her name is Maya. She's the only one who treated me with respect that day. And while you were busy silencing voices, she was quietly helping customers who had nowhere else to go. You see, Derek? People like Maya are the future of this company. People who lead with heart, not control. Derek's lips parted, about to speak again, but the door buzzed. Marcus stepped into the hallway and returned with another staff member, then another. One by one, employees from stores around the region walked in, people who had been mistreated, overlooked, passed up, and now invited to speak. Derek turned pale. This isn't a meeting, Simone said. This is a reckoning. And still, the storm outside rumbled louder, echoing the tension rising inside that glass room. The stories shared weren't dramatic. They were quiet, painful truths. The cashier accused of stealing because her till was short despite no proof. The young man passed over for a promotion 5 times, only to watch it handed to someone with half the experience. The mother who left because she couldn't afford daycare on minimum hours and no benefits. Derek slumped into his chair, but Simone didn't look at him again. Her focus was on the voices around her now. She was no longer the only one demanding change. She had sparked a wave, and still the question lingered in the air, unspoken but powerful. Would justice be served? Would the system truly change? Would this moment lead to something greater, or would it all be buried once again? Number 1 knew for sure, but every heartbeat in that room said the same thing. Something big was about to happen, and no one could stop it now. Moral of the story: never judge someone by their appearance, status, or silence, because the person you disrespect today might be the one holding your future in their hands tomorrow. Kindness, integrity, and humility will always outlast power built on prejudice and pride. Every action matters, especially when no one is watching. Asterisk, if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. More powerful stories coming soon.